and welcome to the Environmental Change Institute. I'm Otto. I'm the Deputy Director of the Environmental Change Institute, and I really just very, very briefly want to welcome you to our institute. The ECI was actually last year we celebrated our 25th anniversary, so it was founded in 1991 at a time when environmental change was sort of beginning to be something that people need to think about, and there was the thought that an institute is needed to integrate all the different fields where environmental change is happening. And the aim and vision of the Environmental Change Institute is to understand environmental change, find sustainable solutions to deal with the challenges in a changing environment, and then influence policy. And the way the ECI is organized at the moment is in 5 different research groups focused around certain topics. So we have a climate group, we have a food group, we have a research group on energy, we have a research group on ecosystems, and one on water. But what is actually happening in these very broad thematic fields is very, very different and totally depends on the people who are there. So the Environmental Change Institute's changes are with the people who are in it. So with Jim Hall being the director, who's an engineer, there's a large focus on infrastructure, for example, in the water group, which was very different before he was the director. And also in the climate group, where Hugo and Diana are part of, there is a focus on climate policy. But what I'm doing is working on extreme weather events, and so very much focusing on the physics, and the same is true for all the other groups. And so for this workshop, this conference that you're having here today about sustainable cities and the sharing economy, that is one of the points, in particular cities is where these things all come together and where we will only find solutions to the environmental problems if all these different people in different fields from different backgrounds work together. So I very much hope that we will see more of these kind of workshops, and that they help integrate the Institute, but also the different researchers on all these fields in the world. So have fun, come up with great solutions, and very welcome to the ECI.
Good morning. My name is Tom Thornton, and I'm one of the project leaders for this Green Wind project that, sorry, I guess I have to switch to the other one, right? Called Green Wind. And I want to give you a little bit of perspective on Green Wind and talk a little bit about how it brought us to the sharing economy, and how we're trying to deal with that in terms of our broader mission of just transforming to sustainability, what we sometimes call T2S, right? So what is Green Wind? Green Wind is a large project that is devoted to looking for win-win strategies for advancing climate and sustainability solutions. And it starts from the premise that there's a lot of things going on already, particularly in the business world, but not exclusively for-profit businesses, but also in other sectors that represent adaptive solutions. And that if we look at the range of business models that are out there and evaluate them in terms of how they are meeting sustainability needs, we might find information and models that are useful and can be generalized to other areas. We are focusing particularly in what's called Work Package 6 in transformations in urban systems. And so this involves the following institutions and people, including a number of people who are here from Oxford, but also partners in Turkey, Istanbul, and also at the Autonomous University of Barcelona, and also Tongji University. And our key question is looking at transformation in urban systems. As Freddie said, The potential big gains in the future are likely to be in cities, because cities represent built environments where the human control factor is very, very high, and they also represent the highest concentrations of people, industry, economic activity, infrastructure, and so on. And another point about cities is that almost all of the population growth that's projected between now and mid-century will be absorbed into cities, mostly in the developing world. So these conjunction of factors mean that we really should be focusing on cities for win-win opportunities. So our key question is, in what enabling environments can opportunity spaces that contain win-win strategies and green business models achieve transformation towards sustainability in urban settings? So there's a couple of concepts there. One is this idea of an enabling environment, and this is really trying to link transformation to adaptation theory, right? You need an environment that's going to select on innovations or mutations, whatever you want to call them, that will enable those innovations to scale up, take off, transform whatever it is. Then there's the notion of opportunity spaces, which is not necessarily an enabling space, but a space where there seems to be an opportunity where something can be developed. And then obviously the idea of a win-win strategy is itself controversial. Some people say there are no win-wins permanently. There may be short-term win-wins, but in the end there's always going to be some kind of zero-sum equation where there are going to be winners and losers. And then this idea of transformation. There's lots of literature and lots of debate about to what extent adaptation and transformation are the same thing and how they relate to other concepts like resilience, and hopefully we'll get further into that later on, so I won't say too much about that. But we're concentrating in our project on C40 cities, Barcelona, Istanbul, Shanghai. So this is 1/12 of the world's population, 25% of the global GDP, and by their own reckoning, 10,000 climate actions that have already been put into place that could be transformative, and in some cases perhaps have been transformative. So here's where we're looking very quickly and trying to identify these win-win strategies and these opportunity spaces. It's taken us to the sharing economy in Shanghai, the mobility sector, in part because of the tremendous activity that's been going on there over the past five years or so. In Istanbul, it's been the urban renewal economy, because again, in building sector, there's tremendous opportunity for win-win gains if you can introduce energy efficiency when you're in the process of urban renewal and transform the systems that are supporting that urban renewal. There are great opportunities. And then in Barcelona, it's been more SMEs, or small and medium-sized enterprises, and so-called smart solutions through ICT. And then finally, we have a fourth project in Venice, which is kind of an add-on that's more into what's called eco-social food businesses, right? And I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, just talk a little bit about our approach. In trying to figure out what we're talking about with an enabling environment and an opportunity space, and in trying to investigate business models, one of the things we thought was important is to do a fair amount of contextualization. You do have to understand not only the present situation in cities, but how they developed. So a little bit about their history and development. And so we've been looking at these things through rather conventional archival literature, but also through interviews. Then we've engaged in identifying green win opportunities and the underlying what we call cultural and cognitive models that support them. Again, this is based on interviews, largely with stakeholders, but also further contextualization of the cases. We selected specific sectors and projects, okay, and again, we saw the biggest opportunities in the high carbon sectors like transport, mobility sector, and in construction, urban renewal. Then analyzing the enabling, and the other side of the enabling is the disabling environments, and then understanding how these relate to city-level sustainability goals and theories. and to what extent they can be scaled up, etc. So once we've done this, then the sort of theoretical work and the comparative work begins in trying to understand how these things relate to what might not be an infinite variety of business models, but a certain strata of business models that exist, and maybe some exist in Istanbul that don't exist in Shanghai, and vice versa, and trying to relate these two capacities, okay? And then comparing them in the end, okay? So that's our basic approach. I'll say in Shanghai, we identified this win-win strategy of synchronizing this emergent sharing economy in the areas of ride sharing, bike sharing, electrical vehicle sharing with urban sustainability, and saw that it potentially could provide significant opportunities for transformation. Then we looked at how this sharing mobility business is evolving, and Yuga will talk more about that later on. And then we, as I said, began these workshops and did presentations and stakeholder workshops in both Shanghai and Beijing, as well as with other experts. And we have some preliminary results, essentially, that there is a strong belief in terms of the cultural cognitive side in the logic and the role of government leading a green win vision of development. But the mobility sector has suffered from policy uncertainty and a kind of winner-take-all mentality around the platform of sharing, ride sharing in particular, and that government intervention was delayed, although it's come of late. And obviously the environment still has a lot of uncertainty around it. And then in terms of thinking more broadly beyond this, I sort of came up with 10 questions that I think are out there with respect to the sharing economy. And of course the first one is it a misnomer, right? The gig economy, the on-demand economy, the sharing economy. The second is, does the sharing economy actually enlarge the precariat or create masters of their own destiny entrepreneurs, which is how it's hyped? Does the sharing economy illegitimately separate risk from reward, with the platform taking the reward, the app, as it were, and the sharers taking all the risk? Fourth, is the sharing economy really improving, much less transforming, environmental sustainability, or are the platform companies really making claims that are really greenwashing? And how are they making these claims, and on what basis? Fifth, are sharing economy platforms parasitic on the cities in which they operate, not paying their fair share of taxes, user fees, and so on? Sixth, does the sharing economy promote efficiency and consumerism at the expense of equitability and citizenship? Seventh, how should the sharing economy be regulated? Two questions. At the municipal level, or the city level, or at other levels, how should that regulation work? Eighth, can the sharing economy platforms be democratized or demonopolized to create more opportunities for data sharing and more equitable forms of sharing between workers and service providers and consumers? The privatization of big data has been a major issue within the sharing economy and may make it difficult to actually achieve its sustainability gains. Ninth, will the sharing economy sustain its rapid growth over coming decades with more regulation? Okay, the growth has been phenomenal. I think it's tripled just within Europe in the past 3 years, something like that. So phenomenal growth, but can it be sustained? And finally, is there a generalizable development model, and this is really the target of our own project, to incubate and synergize sharing economy platforms with so-called triple bottom line goals of economic, social, and environmental sustainability? So I hope we can answer all 10 of these questions today, and then we will probably have our theory of the sharing economy. Thank you.
So I'm going to briefly talk about the findings of our project so far. We are in the second year of our project, and this time I'm going to talk about Shanghai specifically. It's the presentation is called Social, Political, and Cultural Cognitive Transformation in the Smart Sharing System. I will first talk about Shanghai, the context of Shanghai, which shares a lot of the contact with Southeast Asia in terms of its tremendous traffic problem, as well as a problem in London. It's international venture capitalists, all of that play a very, very strong role. And the second, I will talk about a co-evolution mechanism that we conceptualized together with Claron in a previous paper, talking about how this meso-level business ecosystem of sharing mobility co-evolved with the urban sustainability governance in Shanghai. And I don't know why always this number is messed up when I display it. Forgive me. After that, I will talk about a survey we conducted with sharing economy participants to see how this disruptive change have changed the culture cognitive part regarding daily commute. And then the conclusion. So the context of Shanghai. By the way, I just came back from Sweden attending the fourth international workshop on the sharing economy. There were more than 100 researchers sharing their latest studies on the topic of sharing economy. But you can see the majority of them were talking about European cities and European experiences, very tiny portion talking about the Asian experiences. And so we see clearly our definition about sharing economy is completely different. Where in the context of China, in this case, we include business models like Uber, ride sharing, electric vehicle sharing. It's like the electric vehicle version of Zipcar, and smart bike sharing as sharing economy, although they are not necessarily peer-to-peer. Some of them are very B2C, business to customer. We include them as sharing economy because in megacities where you face tremendous public transport and personal transport problem, a lot of the peer-to-peer platform transit into B2C, business to customer, because the customer wants stable and continuous service where peer-to-peer is much less predictable to provide sufficient transport solutions for cities with several, like Shanghai, 30 million population. So, but it is debatable. And in Shanghai, Shanghai is the largest megacity region in the world. It's a big energy consumer and carbon emitter. So the context of Shanghai, we have to understand it under the context of the current Chinese economic growth. This chart is from Nature Geoscience by researchers from Britain and China. They show very clearly that after around 2012 to 13, China reached into post-coal growth. That means a decoupling between economic growth and the coal consumption. So, and the current regime, we have also seen a societal consensus on sustainable development, as well as a policy shift towards greener, more sustainable and ecological growth, as well as technological innovation towards sustainability at multiple levels. So it was under this context, we contextualize Shanghai, the city specifically. So there's three constructs at the three dimensions we consider most important for a megacity. The first is the physical constraints. So in Shanghai, after 30 years of rapid economic growth, the city authority realized this boundary of the physical limits has been exhausted. So last year, when we conducted the research, Shanghai was in the process of producing its next and current master plan, Shanghai 2040, and within that plan, the master plan was saying clearly that Shanghai has to control its population growth, energy consumption growth, carbon emission growth. So that we have to bear in mind that this is a city that cannot grow at the physical level anymore, including its road resources, its traffic, and etc. And the second concern is the knowledge system. I think that means how much sustainability has been integrated into the city's vision, not only at the city's level, but at the policy, community, and the civil society level. And the third is socioeconomic relationship. So we think there are four most important layers of Shanghai's megacity context. The first is its long-standing aspiration to become a global city, meaning the center of global economy. So all of the in the past 20 to 30 years, the main thing of Shanghai development is economic growth. And second is, as I said, the bottom line control that was adopted by the newest master plan, so that we cannot grow in terms of its physical infrastructure anymore. And the third is ICT-led smart city. Within the physical control of this city, the city authority, together with the business cohort, is advancing its digital domain to advance its digital economy in order to compensate to the limit of traditional economic growth. And the fourth is a disruptive change of the emergence of sharing economy. So we identified three most representative business models developing and practiced in Shanghai that we call gradually formed the business ecosystem called the sharing mobility. The first one is obviously everybody knows Didi, the Chinese Uber. The second is EV card, which is the electric vehicle rental scheme. And third is Mobike. It's a free-floating bike sharing scheme. Didi represents the first wave of the sharing mobility in China. It started around 2012, and it became a unicorn startup within 2 years. And the last year, it was evaluated at $36 billion US. And China was the most the first country to legalize ride-sharing practice across the world. But after 3 months, the national government legalized the ride-sharing business. The megacity government, Shanghai, Beijing, Shenzhen, Guangzhou, together launched a very strict regulation on this practice. Namely, most of the drivers have to have local residence and have to have cars with a local car license. So when we talk about this physical constraints, you have to think that you cannot. I'm sure you cannot. We cannot have any population growth, but most of the drivers on this Didi platform are coming from outside Shanghai. So more than 90% of the drivers cannot do this anymore. And the second wave is the electric vehicle. What happened was very interesting. That after the government saw this disruptive technological change, the government tried to leverage its force to realize some of its existing industrial strategy. Promoting electric vehicle has been China's national industrial strategy since the 1980s, but it wasn't that successful in terms of market promotion. So the Shanghai government launched its own electric vehicle rental system using its sharing economy technology. And on this platform, in the beginning, most of the cars are from the Shanghai government-owned automobile manufacturing companies. So this is what we see the second wave, how governments leverage this disruptive change to pursue its existing green economy and industrial development strategies. And the third wave, which is the most revolutionary wave of the sharing mobility, is this free-floating bike sharing system in Shanghai. It started last year in April, and within 10 months, more than 100,000 bikes was operating in Shanghai, and now it operates around 5 million bikes in 90 cities globally, and is aiming for 200 cities by the end of 2017, providing 20 million bike rides on a daily basis. And this company raised around $925 million US of private investments. And it has a lot of problems. I will talk about them in a short while. So we see there's a clear upwards spiral of its co-evolution mechanism between the business ecosystem of sharing mobility and the city's vision, the city's government policies towards more sustainable growth. In the first wave, Didi posed negative effects for the physical limits because it encouraged more riding demands. But in the second wave, EV cars is doing something good for the physical environment because it is electric vehicle, but its socioeconomic impact is very limited. Well, in the third wave, mobile was really changing people's daily commute. Yes, there are problems. I'm sure all of you have seen this. It was hoped bike share schemes will put pollution congestion, but it seems like a lot of users just want to take advantage and do not care about it. And this is a study we are focusing on. We are looking at how people react to such a business model. What happens is one company called Mobike was successful, then there were 100 of them to do that, and the entry level of bike sharing is very, very low. Not like DD ride sharing or the electric vehicle sharing. You have to have heavy physical assets or heavy intellectual assets in order to do that. But for bike sharing, any company can just throw a bunch of bikes on the street. And what we did, we did a case study of Mobike. So on the Mobike system, they actually have a page for customers to help them maintain the system. So if I am a customer, I saw someone misbehave on the road, park the bike wrongly, or steal it or hide it in my own office, in my own home, I can report it. So in that way, the consumers, millions of users, can help become value co-creators in this business model to help maintain trust and try to protect this whole system. And we did a survey to look at what are the factors that are transforming consumers. So those consumers, once they become part of the value creation process of the product, they become not only consumer but also part of the producer. So we call them prosumer. It's a concept from management and consumer study. We found it very interesting. We were trying to look at the enabling factors that make consumers, prosumers transform them from a passive product receiver of the sharing mobility to active value creators. So we did a study of two-stage. The first stage, there were 21 qualitative interviews with people who call themselves bike hunters. So they deliberately and voluntarily help to maintain this system. We talked with them, dig out these 4 potential enabling factors. And then this is 5 enabling factors, including self-efficacy, cognition of duty, company consumer identification, anticipated rewards, and time factor. And we conducted the online survey. It was 457 samples. And we see self-efficacy, cognition of duty, anticipated rewards, and the usage lines are all positively related to people's positive value co-creation behavior. But company consumer identification is not. And in the 10th factor, we see clearly the longer the users stay in the system, the more possible they're going to become a value co-creator. So conclusion. The emergence of the smart sharing mobility provides an opportunity space for T2S in China's megacities. Second, there is a co-evolution mechanism between the sharing mobility business with the governance towards sustainability. And so there is a huge risk of common pool tragedy because the sharing mobility goods, although they are mostly privately owned in China, rely on public goods like road and parking resources to function. Although they also provide part of the public goods such as stable and convenient, affordable daily commute. Fourth, multiple socio-economic relationships are changing. The boundaries between the government, the business, and the consumers are blurring. So we need to address this in order to see how to enable that for sustainable development, which is my last point. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julia. So, maybe a few questions. If you have clarification questions. Yes, please do.
Thank you, that was great. Just a question on this sort of this self-governance of users of the mobiles. Have you also looked sort of at the downside of that you are creating a culture of surveillance and suspicion?
Yeah, we were trying to see that as well, but because this kind of self-organized group is very different from our normal understanding of the civil society group, because they are organized online, but they operate individually. Because different people encounter misbehaviors in their whole neighborhood, in their own office area, but those people, they communicate with each other online to discuss like how can we upload better photos for the for example, if you see a bike is miscarved, you report on the system, but you have to take the photo that can correctly capture its surrounding environment, to capture its status. So they were deliberately making themselves a technical exchange group. Not really. They deliberately saying we are not trying to fight for social justice. We are just making it for fun. We are having fun. So it's like they deliberately try to avoid the thing you're talking about. But I'm sure we are conducting long-term digital ethnography to see how their thinking, their value evolved during this process. Mm-hmm.
Yes, please.
Even we call also that paper. The first wave, second wave, and third wave. But still not very convinced about second wave. You see EV card, the car sharing platform, regarded as a second wave.
Mm-hmm.
So why the mobile as a third wave? So I'm not quite sure.
It's in timeline. So DD started and get extremely popular around 2012 to 14, and EV cars started around 13 to 14, and get spread out across Shanghai, developed 8,000 rental stations around 13 to 15. Well, mobile started last year at 16, and this year it really spread out. So it's a several waves in terms of this timeline. Okay.
Thank you very much, Hugo. So we are gonna go now to the last presentation before the break.
Great.
So we're gonna have Vanessa Timars of the Please.
Thank
The
you.
floor is yours.
Thanks, Anna. So this is so fun to be here because I was the third class of the master's program developed under the Environmental Change Institute. So it's great to be back for that reason. And also I've been part of the Green Wind project since its beginning as an advisor. So it's just really nice to combine those two. And we actually did do a big study of North American cities to see how we tackle the sharing economy and look at it with a critical lens. Is it advancing sustainability? What are cities doing to regulate it? Can we get into issues of equity and carbon consumption and things like that? So I want to share with you at the highest level just kind of what we found in this research. And I want to start with just some stories. Now, let me see here if I do this. Yeah, that does it. So first of all, we found when we talked to local governments, they're just, as everyone was speaking to, really confronted with a tsunami of sharing economy initiatives that are coming their way in North America and around the world. And so let me just tell you 3 recent examples. So in Los Angeles, just this last year, this is a group of people who work in the hotel industry as cleaners, as work in the frontline staff. And what we found was that across the room from them were people who were making money from their homes by renting out a bedroom. And the people working in the hotel industry were just saying, we can't make ends meet because our hours are being shortened. And on the other side, you had a group saying, we're trying to make our lives affordable by renting out a room. They were in black, the other ones were in light blue, and there was the legislator, the city of Los Angeles, right in the middle of it. And both of them were making justice arguments, affordability arguments. So that's just one example. I'll tell you what happened in LA later. City of Seattle, they introduced Car2Go in 2013, and they were asking right from the beginning, does this replace cars? Does it impact transit? Do people, by having Car2Go, do they suddenly start riding the bus less? Do people give up a second car? What's happening in terms of this? And they wanted to find out. They were really, as a city, wondering, how do we even know if this is a good or a bad thing for other goals that the city has? And here's the third example. This is a shipping container that's filled with goods that people might have in their house, right? So sports equipment, library books, leftover toys. So Chris Diplock, you see there in the corner, he's a friend of mine from the city of Vancouver, and he's proposing to set up what he calls thingeries in different neighborhoods in the city of Vancouver, so that instead of everybody owning a drill or owning a kayak, that you could take it out of your own neighborhood thingery. Again, the city of Vancouver is thinking, where do we put these things? What does this mean for the city? Does this take away parking, etc.? So those are just 3 examples, and let's go into the report now, which I was a lead author on, but there were many people who worked on it. The whole report's online. But the idea of it was that we wanted to create a roadmap for local governments who are faced with this tsunami. What do we understand is happening now, and how do we foster more sustainable cities? So thinking of the sharing economy as a tool for fostering sustainability. And this was work, we did this in collaboration with this great network of sustainability directors in cities. So in a city like Toronto or New York, there's somebody who's the environmental or sustainability director. And they formed a peer-to-peer network, which you can see, all those little dots are the 130 cities that work together to think about urban sustainability and move forward on it. It was also sponsored by the J.W. McConnell Foundation as part of Cities for People. So we had project advisors like April Rinne and Neil Gromflow and Wendy Filio and Babe O'Sullivan, who work right in the sharing economy space. And Babe was the main liaison with the Urban Sustainability Directors Network, but also Juliet Shore, who many of you might know, works a lot in the sharing economy. Our advisors were from different cities, City of Portland, City of Vancouver, Toronto, Denver, Flagstaff, Montreal, and the City of Victoria. So we basically walked through the whole project with them. And we looked at all around the world what was happening. We found that, Juliet Shore says this, outside the US, the impetus to sharing transportation, housing, foods, and goods is more integrally tied to city-level goals of carbon emissions reduction, informational transparency, and genuine democracy. And what Juliet Shore was arguing is by embedding sharing economy practices within larger municipal level movements, there's a larger likelihood then that the sharing economy ends up shaping its stated goals towards sustainability. So we looked at the literature about both academic and practitioners' literature on the sharing economy, and we also looked at over hundreds of cases from around the world, but mostly in North America. And you might be asking, well, how did you define the sharing economy? We really looked at all kinds of sharing: share, loan, trade, borrow, rent, swap, barter, sell. And we saw from Tim's slide that there's different terms: share, peer economy, access, asset economy, collaborative consumption. But the sharing economy is the term that's just taken off if you look at the way people speak to this. But as Tim was alluding to, the other ones have slightly different meanings. We looked across 5 categories of actors. So for-profit enterprises, and as we heard, sharing enterprises were often set up by sharing enterprises and cooperatives. And those ones often had goals beyond just the profit margin. Non-profit versions of sharing activities, community-based ones like seed libraries, or people who are doing running, for example, sharing gardens and backyards, those kinds of community-level engagements. And then public sector actors, the public library, for example, municipalities sharing the spaces they have for community kitchens, those kinds of ways. Sharing equipment, so Montreal and Quebec share snow plowing equipment, so whoever needs it the most, it goes from one to the next. So we also defined it across this way. These are key characteristics that many of these groups share. They use information technologies to varying degrees. Community actors often less. It's more person to person. They use idling capacity of assets, and they do access over ownership that we've spoken about already. That's a really big thing, that it's shifting us away from private ownership. They often connect dispersed groups of people, not even just in the city, but beyond that. And a lot of them are often connected to this idea of trust building, reciprocity, and social connectivity. But this to varying degrees, right? If you take a zip car out, there's not a lot going on there in trust and social reciprocity. But if you're sharing toys with your neighbor, then a lot more. And they often embrace the commons to varying degrees as well. We looked across these different sectors: mobility, spaces, goods, food, energy, community sharing, and addressing data gaps. And there are 3 key messages. The first is the sharing economy is not inherently sustainable, but local governments can help shape it to become so. The second is addressing data gaps is critical. Otherwise, we don't know which way the sharing economy activities are moving. And the third is community sharing is a promising area which is often overlooked within local governments. So I'm going to take you through a walk through each of those ones. So the sharing economy is not inherently sustainable, but we can make it more so. We created a sustainability filter across a number of different areas. This is it in its full with all the key questions, but let me go into the questions in detail. So number one, living within ecological means. Does the sharing economy activity actually advance absolute reductions in energy and materials? Does it enhance resilience and climate adaptation? Does it build up and protect natural systems? Does it advance equity and social inclusion? And does it bring advanced economic vitality, self-reliance, and decent jobs? And does it create social connectivity and well-being? So each of those sectors, we look through all of these 6 sectors, these visions. So I'm going to show you an example. You all know Airbnb, and of course this is what happened in New York between 2008 and 11 in terms of, and then check out San Francisco, right? It was just an explosion in a couple of years. So it went from, as many as the Hilton hotel chain, right, within 5 years. And it's not the only one. We know there's many, Home, Link, Flip, Key, all sorts of different ones. But many of them were illegal, right? People weren't claiming them, taxes weren't being collected, there were questions of safety. Somebody's squatting in my condo and I can't get them to leave. But there were also great things, like when Hurricane Sandy, that was a bad thing happened. What Airbnb did is they stood up for looking at about 1,200 people gave their rooms up from Airbnb for people to use, and that now Airbnb has a Airbnb responds to emergency circumstances with Airbnb as well, and that's called BayShare in San Francisco, where you have emergency planning being directly connected to the sharing economy. And people can rent all sorts of things, igloos, planes, teepees, what have you. But the interesting thing is that that's one kind of diversity. But what's happened, and you probably heard this, that the diversity of the people being able to rent from Airbnb was not equal for everybody. So this is an actual racist comment, right? So why can't I rent from you? One word, Asian. Literally, this is happening. And Dennis Ang, and there's another Harvard study that showed if you used African American names, that it was 15% less chance of getting rented to. And in Uber and Lyft, Uber and ride sourcing cars were turning off their indicator that they were in low-income neighborhoods. So if they dropped off there, they'd turn off their dial, drive away to higher income neighborhoods and turn it back on again. So these are the kinds of things that cities were being faced with. And Airbnb went back and actually said, okay, they're quite slow to do this, but they realized they needed to be committed to it. So, for example, Airbnb hosts may not, for example, decline a guest based on these things, race, color, ethnicity, etc. And in California now, they actually, for people still having more than 3 Airbnbs that they rent on, California has the legislative right to pretend to be someone from a different race and test hosts on whether or not they're racist. If they are, they get taken off the platform. So that's the main kind of aspect of what they do. So let me just say a couple things about the other 2 pieces, the data sharing one, and I won't do it with slides because we're low on time, and the community sharing. On data sharing, there's some really interesting innovations that are happening. So for example, the city of Portland, when Uber and Lyft wanted to come in, they actually said you can come in, but you need to share all your data. And that's what Seattle did with Car2Go. And what it ended up showing was that, for example, transit, sorry, I'm just going to scroll down. Transit, the results from the shared data oh, I'm not sure if it'll work if I do that. I have to double click. How do I get to this one? I'm not sure. Anyway, so basically what it showed was the car sharing data showed that with Car2Go, you had some negative impacts on public transit, but you did have that people gave up their second car and there was less vehicle miles traveled per person, and people used it in combination with transit. There's also data scraping happening, so people are using Airbnb and public information to find out if the places where people are Airbnb are the same as rental. And we're finding that's the case in New York and Vancouver, and the rental market is suffering because of it. So that kind of data sharing, data scraping, and also cities asking for making it a mandate that sharing economy enterprises share their data as part of their regulation, that's critical. And the final thing I'll say is about community sharing. This is an area, cities often focus on the regulation and enforcement, but there is so much to be done in supporting things like fix-it clinics and repair cafes, toy libraries, sharing of backyards, all these different sharing maker spaces. That community sharing is often, like in a fix-it clinic, you have great connections amongst different people of different ages and ethnicities. People are starting to ask for more durable products. All sorts of things are happening at that community sharing that really overlaps with sustainability goals. And in Hennepin County, Minnesota, 25% of one city staff person, all they do is plan these repair cafes and fix-it clinics throughout the county. So I just wanted to say community sharing as a final point is such a critical piece that city governments are just starting to understand how much it advances their sustainability goals. So I look forward to the discussion and to our conversation as we move forward.
Thank you very much, Veronica. So, any questions?
Oh, I should open keep this over there.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, you do, please.
Yes.
You have
Yeah.
to shout because we don't hear.
Yeah.
Is there any good examples of the city governments that you work with that are really promoting and trying to integrate sharing economy to achieve their sustainable goals?
Yes, so many of them actually. So one of the things we found was that for some, it became the main front thing that they were displaying, right? That they really wanted to be known as a sharing city. So you see that in Seoul, actually, in Korea as well. Vancouver definitely has sharing as one of the big things that it's putting out there, as one of the things it's supporting. But I would say for many of the cities, they actually had already goals in existence that they were pushing forward around climate adaptation, resilience, a just community. And what they did is they saw sharing economy as a technique for achieving those goals. So you have things like Bay Share and San Francisco, for example, really supporting sharing. But I would say it's more likely that city governments emphasize their existing commitments and talk about how sharing can help them get there. That was what we saw much more often, as opposed to standing up and being like, we're sharers, Los Angeles. Right? Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I'm wondering, from the One World Earth perspective, how is that linked, if at all, with the SDGs agenda?
Yeah, so I think in a similar way, the Sustainable Development Goals, the sharing economy actually ends up hitting on so many different aspects of sustainability. And as we've been talking about before, it is not necessarily an improvement.
Yes.
It can actually take us the wrong direction quickly. And so what we found is that almost all of the cities would start with urban sustainability and then look at the sharing economy. And that's where they would link to their work with the Sustainable Development Goals, as opposed to being all like kind of blown away with sharing economy enterprises. They really were asking, does this help the public good? To the dismay of a lot of entrepreneurs who were like, just get out of the way and let us do our thing. But then as implications started showing up, that people started to realize, okay, wait a minute, we do need the government to step in. But in the United States, it's still a battle. Canada is less of a battle, like the Nordic countries and cities putting regulatory frameworks around these things. Yeah.
Thank you. So, let's take a couple of minutes. We are okay on time. We started 10 minutes late, and if you are okay, we are going to get our coffee break with 10 minutes late. So I would like, now if you have questions for either Vanessa, Hugo, Godofredo, or Tim, and I know you are going to have to go quickly.
In about 5 minutes.
5 minutes. I would. So Tom, I don't know if it was directly to Vanessa or some of the other speakers of the morning.
Well, it's sort of like, are there good examples, or is there a kind of theory that would support the idea of the connectivity, right? So one of the issues is that you have public transportation systems, so mobility economy. If you bring in an Uber or whatever, you not only want them to support your plan, but you might want them to support connectivity. Are there examples where a city has been able to sort of mandate that and get the kind of connectivity that would really make the system work?
Absolutely. So two of the ones that I wanted to share was that I want to share with you is Chicago and Montreal. So in both cases, they created an integrated transportation system, one card for everything, and it's really made the difference. But what happens is people start making different decisions depending on where they are in the city and what they're doing. We actually, in our report, recommend that ride sourcing, so the Ubers of this world, are really great solutions for the last mile, the last kind of part after you've finished doing all the public transit. That the suburbs are often, and really encouraging having that option at that point is really a great one, or a smaller micro transit there. But I think in Vancouver, for example, we gave all of the university students bus passes, and they started to learn during their university years how to navigate through the city with public transit. And now they're past university age because the program's been around for 10 years. And we found with that group that learned those behaviors at that time, they don't automatically go into vehicle ownership only. A lot of them start to do a multimodal set of decisions. So if they're near a bike share, they'll grab it. If they just missed the bus, they'll grab a car to go. Like, they're kind of making these decisions that are really integrated. And absolutely our biggest thing in the shared transportation space, we said create integrated mobility systems, which to me is very interesting that the UK will have a hard time kind of getting into that space. Because what ends up happening otherwise is you get massive competition on the roads for these different systems. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, kind of continue. Yes, I'm dealing with Adam from Oxford. These two comments really, but the first one is that I suppose that the challenge becomes if you need to scale down one aspect of, because obviously integrating and planning a system involves also not just building up things, but also building down things, right? Taking down things. So how do you tell a private, let's say, ride sourcing app that I'm afraid we're going to have to close your operations in the city or radically scale them down? That's going to be a bit of a fight, isn't it?
Well, they did. So Portland, Austin, who else did this? They put a cap on the number of car sharing cars. So cities have actually gone out to cap that activity. But as you say, it's because they've seen where there's challenges with just allowing anybody and going ahead.
But I suppose it's happened now when the rules are still being figured out. Like Austin was a kind of response in a way. Yeah. But what if you have an integrated system that's been going on for a decade, and then you have to tell one of the partners in that system that now actually we don't want you anymore? That's going to be more difficult. And I'm not really expecting a response to this. But the second point I wanted to make,
I think that's interesting. It would be really interesting to ask Montreal and Chicago, because they've both been running integrated mobility systems now for a period of time.
Right.
I'd be very interested if they've had that experience, because I think you're right. In any innovation, there's different dynamics happening.
But the second example I was kind of was the mass of Tom. Like one of the, I thought, Tom, that your list of the issues is really great. Yeah. And I think there was something about local democracy and community and all of that there as well. And that's one of the things that came through in Tim's talk was that, platform capitalism versus more inclusive, democratic, community-based models. But then my problem with that, which kind of came out when you talked about discrimination, is that really historically human rights is something guaranteed by the state, not by communities. So communities are based on homophily, on discrimination happens in communities, and then state comes and intervenes. So it's not clear to me that if you're promoting nice, community sounds really nice, but it's not necessarily very democratic. Communities are hierarchical, charismatic leadership and all of that. So can we somehow have something that's not back from capitalism, but it's not, let's go back to traditional society, pre-modern.
Oh, and you're so right. Some of Juliet Shore's work in Boston was that one thing is that the gift economy, people can choose who they're gifting with. And so that's one aspect. But also the meal sharing that they saw in Boston, people were actually excluding people coming in with meals that they didn't recognize. So as you say, community groups are not always like, no, that's not how we do things, literally with some of the conversations she was overhearing. So as you say, I think unless it's been barely put in. And there's a wonderful example in Minnesota called Nice Ride Minnesota, where they went in with a bike sharing program and just plunked it down. It was the same one that was in the rest of Minneapolis in a low-income community, and it didn't get used. And then they went in and said, well, what's happening here? People didn't have credit cards to use it. People had a stigma against biking, and they just felt like, this isn't working. So, and instead, what they ended up doing is they ended up redesigning it with the community. So city government, with the equity goal, redesigning it with the community. The first thing they did was give 140 orange bikes to the prominent people in the community, principals, business leaders, everyone. And then the whole community saw all these people they loved riding out on bikes, made it easy to do it, but it was designed with state and community together, because then the rules could be set, because otherwise it would be very difficult.
Sorry. Sorry, Billy. Sorry, please stop, Tim. Actually, if I can just jump in, because I would like you to reflect also. I know you have to go in a couple of minutes, but how important is this basically this regulatory aspect, and exactly what Billy was hinting at, this role of state versus the community in the research? In your view?
I think it's a very interesting, a very important issue, and I was going to sort of suggest that the Scandinavian examples are interesting because they're not about community or the state, but actually it's very much about the integration of the two. And it's particularly sort of at the city level where this is sort of playing out. And in the Scandinavian context, and to a degree also in the Netherlands, it's still very clear regulation by government of the cooperative sector. And it's a really different model from the Anglo-American model, where community is often seen sort of as this alternative to an interventionist state. It's kind of approach. And I think we need to move beyond that and sort of expose it for what it is. It's a geographical specificity. It's an Anglo-American or Anglo-Saxon way of thinking that is not replicated across other parts of Europe and certainly Asia and beyond.
Thank you very much. So I suggest you join me in thanking all the speakers from the morning, and now we have a 10 minutes coffee break. The coffee break is just behind you. And so thank you very much.
Thanks for the invitation. And the title of my presentation is about understanding sharing economy. What's the difference between the we call sharing economy 1.0 and the sharing economy 2.0? Why we have to compare this? Because in China we have a lot of debate about what is sharing. And someone said mobile is not sharing, it's a fake sharing. And someone said only Didi and Uber is a sharing economy. So we want to understand, we do not want to, we do not delete those new models of the sharing economy. So we start to think about what's new in those business models, the mobile and the offer. So that's why we look into very in-depth about sharing economy, how it evolved. So my presentation will focus on the evolution of the sharing economy. My research topic is about ecosystem and the sharing economy, data-driven ecosystem. I got my PhD from the other university, the Cambridge University. So thanks for giving me the opportunity. Okay, so what's the sharing economy? We can see a lot of sharing economy model like sharing mobility, sharing accommodation, sharing skill, and sharing learning. And right now in China we have this market booming. And right now the hottest topic is about how the sharing bike, how they. Why sharing economy is very popular? I list 3 key reasons. The digital technologies. If you do not have a mobile payment, if you do not have ICT platform, you cannot get access to a massive supply and demand. And also we have a different kind of focal company to provide the online market, like Didi, like we have a lot of Chinese version of AMB and Upwork. Well, we are very optimized in the future about our sharing economy market will reach about 10%, more than 10%, and 20% into 2025. So that's why Chinese put this sharing economy term into our annual report. So there are a lot of new models into Chinese market. And why Chinese have this kind of embrace this new model, because our institutional environment is very flexible. It's more adaptable. It's not very rigorous like the Japanese. You can say in Japan market, they're illegal, still illegal, right? When I talk to the Japanese delegates, after 20 years, they don't know what is sharing economy, or they don't know the word. So it's kind of strange to me. But I know institutional environment matters a lot. So what's a sharing economy? I work with Professor Yung Wang to determine this kind of, to define this the concept of sharing economy. I can see the sharing economy 1.0, they share idle resources. You own a car first, you rent a car. But right now, more and more sharing economy model is about new resources. You invest in new bike, you just share it. So it's kind of different. This is more C2C sharing. This is more B2C sharing. So that's the key change of the sharing model right now. So in that way, we disagree with the concept provided by the economists. Our new sharing concept could be sharing economy is naturally the access economy, which to meet the customer own demand requirement by offering access service. So the key word is access. So you can access at any time, anywhere, and whoever can access it. So it's more very on-demand economy. So that's what we call access. Now, because this one is still not very timely, but this one is very timely access. I can give you more explanation about the sharing economy 1.0 and the 2.0. And 1.0 is about the firm sell the product to customers. Then the owner start to rent their idle resources. This we call the adaptive sharing, from ownership, then to rent. So you can say some typical example about peer-to-peer economy, platform economy. They share on platform. This platform with the supply and demand. But the new model of B2C sharing, the company is the platform provider, also supplier. They integrate. So the sharing economy 1.0 is more platform based. So they rental based. So the typical is the Airbnb and the Uber and the Uber joint as well. So the nature of sharing economy 1.0 is about the buyer or renter. You become buyer or renter. You can become the both. And the key, the cost, because we talk we mentioned a lot about the transaction cost. So the key cost of sharing economy 1.0 is about bringing it to market cost. How you can put your idle resources into the market, into a platform, and you share it. So this will be the key cost of this sharing model. And the bond sharing, we name this a bond sharing because they didn't sell the product, they only rent the product. And I don't know how many of you know the sharing, the mobile is kind of the business model. You can get access anywhere and use your mobile payment. So you just use for access, maybe 10 minutes, maybe 20 minutes. You never use it for whole day. So this model divides the time into very small parts. So and all those products were provided by some companies. So they are business to customer and their own demand economy. This is more service oriented than no product oriented. So the typical case is sharing bike and the cloud computing. When you need some extra storage, you get access to the cloud computing. And also car2go. But the car2go, Zebra normally we rent by 1 day or 2 days or half days. But right now in China, car2go or EV car, they rent just for access like maybe 1 hour, 2 hours. So So you can see the efficiency of transaction become higher and higher. So that's why we think the sharing economy 2.0, bond sharing is different from a rental economy. So what's the nature of sharing economy? So we have to deal with 5 aspects: who, when, where, how long, how much. So this is product life cycle. So you have a different time pyramid, pyramid 1, pyramid 2. So what you need is, okay, who will use this service, when, and how long, very, very small scale, and where, anywhere, and how much. So we can model this kind of sharing economy. You can say it's different from the adapt sharing. Adapt sharing is about from ownership to rental. But right now it's just starting from the rental. So we can identify how many people and how long you need it, and anywhere, and how much you need to pay per access. So it's a very timely access model for sharing economy 2.0. So a little comparison between these two models. One is the sharing 1.0. It's more adapt sharing, C2C, use access resources. The other one could be duality, and sharing, bond sharing is from the bike, and then you can B2C and new resources, pay by per access. So some cases. Yeah, you can see a lot of new bikes was flooded in Chinese street, and you can use your mobile payment, smartphone to scan and then use it. Very cheap, about only 10p, 10 penny. And also you have some sharing charger. It's because smartphone is always low battery. So you can find this kind of very small storage, put into the different coffee shop or some store, grocery store, and then you can just exactly same with this model. And you can do it by yourself and charge it, and maybe only 1 hour, only 10 as well. And you can see normally previously our sharing 1.0 is have to take place in the customer side. But in the future, sharing economy 2.0, it will go upstream. So when you design the model, it's this is a plan chain. So when you design this model, it will to consider about the sharing. So this business model is bond sharing. Yeah, that's why we call this model bond sharing. So the key, this picture is the key of the two different models. The sharing economy 1.0 adapt sharing, you can first sell the product to customer A, and the customer A rent to the customer B. That's the Uber model. And the sharing economy 2.0, bond sharing, firm only sell access service to massive customers. And they just so all the massive customers to share this product. So this make full good use of these bikes, and in very timely. So just to compare the concept. 1.0 rent access resources. 2.0 sell the access service. Right now in China we have other business of sharing bond sharing business model, sharing bike, sharing broadcasting, and also sharing knowledge. They are also designed for sharing. They are not designed for sell product, but just designed for sharing. So the business model of the challenge for business model 2.0. Right now we put the deposit about 300 Chinese yuan, and also pay by per access. So why this that doesn't work very well? Because if you put your deposit there, so you cannot use the money. Because company have to invest a lot of money to produce the bike. So but they cannot use this deposit to purchase a bike. So it's a strong regulation there. But we said that maybe the suggested model two-part tariff. We could use the membership fee and access fee. It will be much less government regulations. And we all know we have Oxford Hub in London, and we have used that membership fee. So we suggested to replace the deposit fee. Deposit fee is under Chinese strong government regulation. So we also have some predict some future of the autonomous vehicles. And in the future, we think that the lower and middle level car could be bone sharing. They didn't sell these cars, but they just you like subscribe the mobile phone. You subscribe the tunnel network. So in the low and the middle level, we thought this sharing will be bone sharing in the future. But the high level, because they need some social status for owning cars to avoid uncertainty, they may be still selling model. So the autonomous vehicles, we think it's definitely bone sharing in the future, and everyone just give all the subscriber to some companies, so you can have those cars to have a ride. Finally, this conclusion picture is very important. When we compare the traditional economy, rental economy, sharing economy 1.0, sharing economy 2.0, we use two dimensions. One is time extension. So this is a whole life cycle. You own this product, but this you only use it by 10 minutes. So it's a time extension. We can call time division on demand, and this is access expansion. Previously, when you own this product, you only access by one person or two person or your family. But when you go to sharing economy, massive people access. So from this matrix, you can see what's the difference between we can say rental economy and bone sharing. Rental economy normally just belong to one person or two person, but the sharing 2.0, the bone sharing, each bike can be used by 20 person per day in China normally. So, and the sharing economy 1.0, it's only will do the business along some period of time, but bone sharing will do the business very small scale of time. So those are the different, and we think in the future more and more bone sharing will happen, will take place. So that's the conclusion. The way from only renting to accessing. So that's the future trend of the sharing economy. Thank you very much.
Questions? So we have Billy, Vanessa, and then yes.
Thank you very much, Claire, for the presentation. One of the things I found most interesting was what you said about the kind of greater granularity of the time, smaller slices of time that can be rented out. And I'm wondering about the sort of microeconomic implications of that, because we have the same thing in the online gig economy. We study people who do some work on a freelance basis in very small time slices. You can buy their services just for 1 hour. And that means you have potentially a lot more people who can buy those services, because you don't have to buy a whole day or a whole week, so it increases demand. But it also means you have a lot more people who can supply those services, because now you have some people can do it in the weekends or evenings and so on. But the point is that there's a different equilibrium price probably as a result. And so when you take something like cars or car sharing, how does the supply and demand react when you slice it into smaller time slices?
I'm not quite understand your question, but from my understanding, for the car or for the bike, because you when the customer want to use those bikes, they already register those payments, so they can just scan those. And in China, it is allowed to park the bikes in anywhere except the main road. You can put it on the roadside. So, and we also have a very good technology for GPS. We can find those cars easier. So in that way, the customer could use that bike one by one very easily. So there's not many time delay.
Could you even say that that's the main thing, that you just need to be able to make the smallest possible unit
Yes.
as small as possible in order to unlock this huge market for, in this case, bike. So is that the key thing? To move from 1 day into 1 hour into 1 minute?
Yeah. So I think the key issue in sharing economy about this is the transaction cost. If we in the future, why we want to own the car or we want to own the car for 1 day, just because we want to avoid uncertainty. But right now, due to the technology, due to mobile payment, due to GPS, we can avoid uncertainty. We can easily find the next bike. So that's why we think the smaller units is better if we can still overcome the uncertainty.
Vanessa?
Yeah. So I'm not sure if I would characterize it as 1.0 and 2.0
Yes.
because all of those players still exist.
Yes.
And what I'm hearing what you're saying is that the opportunity that this shift, so historically we all shared things. You know, you borrowed the horse from next door, library books were in the library, so those just happened. Then we went through a period where everything was about personal ownership. Your own car, your own tools, your own clothes. And now we're like, oh my gosh, too much stuff, or we don't want it to sit idle for all this time. And now we're wanting this access, which is possible because of digitization. So to me, it seems like a historical moment. And as you say, people are now designing for this new possibility. And that's the born sharing, which I like that idea because in a way, it's a reaction to the new possibility. But I still see that people are going to be renting their personal stuff out to others. That might still happen for a period of time.
Yes.
And the rental economy, people built hotels to be shared. So in a way, though, what you're pointing out is that there's a new set of players reacting to this new moment. So personally, I would hold on to board sharing, but I wouldn't necessarily call it 2.0 because I think the other things are still going to be there. And the other piece of that is just to say, in the goods world, when they put drills and saws and tools into tool sharing, they were used much more frequently. So they built better tools, the companies, because if the tools are going to be shared, they have to be durable.
Yes.
Born sharing leads to actually, hopefully, more sustainable design if you get durable products that can be. So it's not just access, we can actually ask the born sharing to consider equity and sustainability in their design in order to do it. And that's the exciting thing that you can do with born sharing.
Right.
Yeah.
Because when you want to it's born sharing, you need to make it could be born sharing.
Exactly.
So the manufacturer design it, and so that's why we put that picture to say it should be moved upward. Should be moved upward.
Yes.
So sharing manufacturing, sharing design, sharing. So
right to the design phase. Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yes, absolutely.
But I love born sharing. I just don't know if it's helping you because, first of all, 1.0 Uber drivers, many of them bought new cars to be able to do the things. So they actually born shared in their own house, right? So I'm not sure if it quite works. I just think the born sharing is, I would hold on to that because that's to do with this time and the new companies that are emerging in response to this. I think that's a really great insight. Personally, yeah. And the design possibilities,
Yeah, when we discover the new phenomena, and we think this is kind of new model to for the future.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, because people due to the ICT technology, we do not have to own some things. We just use it. So for that, the process will be easily to achieve. So that's why we think that more and more products will be born sharing.
Yeah.
So what I suggest, I know there are 2 more questions. I would like first that we go to the last presentation of Professor Ramizo. And then we're gonna actually have almost an hour of discussion, so we can have, well, we can discuss. Please, Professor.
To be honored to hear your lecture about my study about sharing economy. Today I want to make an introduction about a case study in China, sharing fighters. Yuge and Ron give a lecture about a circle framework about sharing bikes. I will give you specific data about Chinese bikes sharing. First, let me see market structure. In China, especially in Shanghai, Beijing, and these major cities, people in transportation with last mile problems. Maybe this last mile problems cause problem of their transportation. The bicycle give them a very useful tool to solve these last mile problems. Let me see the data. The market size of a shared bicycle reached 1.23 billion yuan with 28 million users. According to a report by Chinese Ministry of Communication, the level of congestion reduced by 7.4%, 4.1% and 6.8% in Beijing, Guangzhou, and Shenzhen, while the proportion of shared bicycle usage doubled from 5.5% to a significant 11.6%. And this picture of China City in the bike sharing scheme. This from Financial Times. And now there are more than 25 bicycle sharing companies in China. Mobike and Ofo is the two largest companies that have a safety 85% to Ofo component almost 30%, and Mobike almost about 57%. And this is the bicycle owned by our companies. You see, Mobike about 365 million, and Ofo about 250 million. And this is China bicycle sharing the development. You see the took up in the second half of 26. Before then, the sharing bicycle is very small. Mobike have introduced these companies. I supply some details. Mobike, you register Mobike, you have to take a prepaid to 2,099 yuan to as a deposit, and when and 30 minutes you have to cost 1 yuan, and if the retail cost classic motorcycle about is per minutes 0.5 yuan. Now only more than 300 mini bicycles and over 20 million daily orders. In February of this year, Mobile achieved operation with WeChat, Tencent, the famous Chinese internet companies. And another famous sharing bicycle company is Otto. They have received less than mobile deposit with just 99, and retail free if credit over 650 in Zima credit. This is by Ali company are offered. And between 26, it developed in 43 cities, China, and 3 cities overseas. Achieved strategic completing with Zima credit in March of this year. That's just market structure. Now give you introduce about operation status. This sharing mobiles operation model consistently financing and passing flows and their pay cost. Financing you can mobile have received over 1.2 billion. Just now that registered over 0.6 billion, which is the highest record in this sharing industry. Otto has received over 0.6 billion and looking for a new round of 0.5 billion funding with a value of 3 billion. This is a very high valuation. Cash inflows they have consider two paths. One is deposit and another is retail for utility. Mobile has more financing advantage compared to Otto because they have received the total amount of the deposit is at 3 times larger than Otto. Here we have a table. You see the mobile daily active users is 4.17 million, Otto 4.4 million almost. But they have different amount of deposit. Mobile is 299 yuan and Otto is just 99 yuan. So the total amount of deposits mobile is 1.247 billion. Otto just only 0.435 billion. And the total number of bikes owned, mobile is just 300. Sorry, this no point. No, sorry, it's 306. Sorry, that's no point. And so we can commuter they have annual retail income. Mobile is about 4.21 billion and Otto is about 4.25 billion. Let's just their benefits are just routine. Now let's count their cost. Cost consider about 7 parts, and in different development phase, they have different degree cost. If we check the specific number, we find Mobike and Oppo, they used different manufacturing technology. For example, the transmission, Mobike use screwdriver, some chain driver, also many chain driver. The screwdriver is not easily damaged. A chain driver is very easily damaged. And bicycle type, Mobike is rock flat, and also is stock type. Bicycle lock is very important. Mobike is almost Bluetooth intelligent lock, also mechanic lock. And other things, you know the cost for Mobike about 300 yuan, also just 300 yuan. So total manufacturing cost for Mobike now is about 10.95 billion, also just 0.75 billion. But you can damage ratio. Oppo is almost 40%. Mobike is 26.2. So we can calculate their damage cost. So now okay, the profitability analysis, and just for deposit and existing, they maybe not profit, but they have another revenue, including advertising revenue. This advertising includes 2 parts. One is APD advertising and bicycle advertising. And another income is a data income. In data income is that didn't disclose this income, but it's a very very big part. So and another is government support. Government gave some subsidy to the including Beijing, Shanghai, and other cities to support the bicycle sharing companies. So now you can sharing bicycle has some speech taxi, shared cars, and ride sharing. From this table, you can basically use the 0.5 to 3 kilometers. Is also just bicycle, and another distance is more, and people will use different tools to solve their ride. So another feature terminal is smart demand and capacity. Now people have a strong demand, but limited capacity in the first-tier cities, and especially space for this bicycle to stop there. And another is intelligent management for bicycles, especially for government. And another problem is code conduct and integrated construction. Our career is sharing bikes is a new business model for sharing economy. There is a competitive advantage in environment where the development. And third is sharing bikers with intelligent management, not only by firms but also by the government. Okay, thank you.
So we'll take a couple of questions before moving on to the yeah, please.
Sorry, I may be asking too many questions, but very quickly, why is the supply limited in the first two cases? You said that in the first case it is demand is growing, but supply is limited. Why is the supply limited?
Supply is because there are not enough space to for the bicycle to stand there. Having a parking problem. So they need government intelligent management.
China used to be a kingdom of bicycles in the 80s and 90s. Then we were developing, urban planning was developed into open cities. We were building a lot of roads for the cars, and in many cities we did not have the parking resources for bikes. So that when this free floating lecture and skiing boomed in Chinese cities, we found a lot of the main streets were blocked by piles of bikes. Yeah, then the government started to sell it.
Especially in the central city.
Yeah, please.
So, what do you think would be intelligent management like a city now, given the way the competition is developing?
First, by the firms, I think firms should use intelligent look and GPS technology to find where the bicycle location and send their staff to collect the. Now in China, there's a very tight phenomenon， 就是叫潮汐现象，就是早上大家都集中到车到这个地方，是那个。 In peak hour, the bike will go to the working place, but in night it will back to on the stations. So it's a problem. It's a bigger problem now. So I think maybe the firm should set their staff to intelligent management. This is the firms. Yeah, and the firm also do other activities, for example, to make some extra deep money to if you it's intelligent pricing mechanism. If you use a bicycle from remote place and to come give you a bonus or give you a free.
By riding bikes. But
Yes.
what happened is some people just store bikes in remote areas and ride it for their money.
Yeah.
But the mobile is saying, it's good for us, so we don't care.
Okay, last question from Vanessa.
Yeah, that was my question. Was I saw the students got on campus, you get a lower rate,
Yeah.
and I'm hearing now that people are making money riding bikes in. Does low-income person in China also have a smartphone still, or is there? Okay, so that's not a problem. Everybody's got a smartphone. Are there other things Mobike and OFO are doing to help low-income people?
Not a low income people. I think every people will.
Well, that's it. So is it already helping? Like,
Pricing is very affordable. Very affordable.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah. 10 people per access.
Yeah.
Very cheap.
So that's actually helping generally. And is biking cool again? Is it going back to being okay to bike?
Yeah. Well, after you are stuck in
traffic
for 3 hours, it's becoming cold.
Yeah.
Okay, Professor Wang, thank you very much. So thank you. What I suggest now is that whoever wants to grab a coffee, I suggest we don't have a real formal coffee break. Just everybody grabs coffee, and I would invite, obviously the panelists can also grab a coffee, but I would say, let's move quickly into the panel, and so all right, so I'm not going to introduce the speakers you already heard from this morning, because but let me just very briefly introduce. So we'll have Professor Billy. Can you help me with your name? I have a horrible name, so try. Yeah. Okay. So from Oxford Internet Institute, and we have Dr. Brendan Doody from the Transport Studies. Doody. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Okay, so, and of course you have the panelists from this morning. So I would say, of course, it's going to be a very open discussion, but I hope the questions Tom basically shared with us this morning at the beginning were a kind of food for thoughts. And something we can put them here, that would be good. That would be, I think if you can still find them, that would be great. But so first, I heard from the speakers this morning, but also in the contributions Billy made in his questions. I would like you first to reflect a bit on these regulatory issues, which are in the shared economy space we are talking about, because everybody hinted this morning a bit but how these regulatory issues via the flexible governance, via the shared kind of regulations, via what we call sunset clausing, where you have a kind of flexible regulation being put in temporarily, trying to see coming and going. You were talking just minutes ago about how the NDRC, for example, is trying to encourage startups to enter the market, but when you have, OFO and Mobike, I'm even wondering, is there any kind of space in such an oligopolistic market to enter such a? So I would like if you can have a kind of first reflections around the regulatory issues, around the sharing economy in the cities, yeah? So maybe let's have Brendan and Billy starting, and then we follow up.
Oh, yeah. You want to ring? All right. Well, I'll say something. So, I think that when we talk about regulating markets, one interesting thing about these platform companies, obviously, is that they have a lot of data, a lot of very detailed data on their market participants. In the case of peer-to-peer platforms, both the buyers and the sellers. And that's traditionally been the government's job. And the government, in some ways, sort of in modernity, government and data are co-constitutive. The very first databases in the world are surveys conducted for the purposes of taxation. Now we suddenly have this situation where private companies have more data than government has. And so private companies are in some ways better able to regulate marketplaces, to weed out bad behaviors, and so on. And they are also very rapid at experimenting, right? So we have companies like Airbnb, for example. We know that they do something like 100 A/B tests. What are in the tech world called A/B tests, but policy experiments, essentially running at any given moment. Whereas if you think about the government policy-making process, it's much slower, and even at the end of the policy cycle, the results are not necessarily evaluated, and even if the policy didn't have the intended effect, it's not necessarily rolled back. And this is not what happens in a platform company. So it's very interesting benefits to this private kind of regulation. But what it doesn't address, and I'll finish there, is externalities, right? So it doesn't address Airbnb. Airbnb knows a lot about their hosts and their guests, but they don't know anything about the neighbors and what inconvenience or harm may be caused to neighbors. So they're not even if they wanted to, they're not able to take that data into their policy-making process. And moreover, they don't really have a mandate to do so either, because they, as a company, are primarily concerned with serving the interests of their customers, not some third parties who may be affected by it.
Thank you very much. Brendan, you want to?
Sure. Yeah, well, I guess it's a slightly difficult question in the sense that there's lots of different things you can cover by regulations, and I think. Yeah, definitely one of the challenges is around things like the data and who can get access to data. And so then if we're starting to think through issues of how sustainable are these different platforms, if the fact that they won't release their data for privacy concerns or competitive reasons, and I think you picked up on this in the States, where some of the cities are actually legislating that that's part of the process of coming in. So if we're wanting to understand these things, I think one aspect is getting access to data, and so that's where regulations can kind of come into thing. I guess another aspect, again, and people picked up on this in different ways, are thinking about issues of social justice. And so I guess my reluctance to leave everything up to the market is the market has particular markets that they're targeting. And so other user groups are very likely to get excluded from those things. So I think that's kind of an important role that governments and different regulators can play in terms of, I guess, almost redistributing some of the benefits of these things if we're going to interrogate them as benefits. I'm trying to think, and I guess, like a final point is just thinking, and people talk about this in different ways, thinking about how we define things like the sharing economy has then implications on what sorts of things get captured within this. And I think that's one thing about innovative companies. They're very good at manoeuvring around regulations by coming up with new models. And so I think that's going to be an important part as well.
Thank you very much. Yugi, you want to jump in?
I think I fully agree.
You have to shout, because nobody listens.
Okay, I fully agree with both of you. I think there are two biggest challenges for regulation. The first is the blurring of the boundaries of the different entities that we used to think of. We used to think there's government, there's business, there is a consumer, there's a producer. So we have different labor law, consumer law, or competition law to deal with different of them. But in the sharing economy, a consumer can be a producer at the same time, and the company can also provide public goods like affordable transport. And so this, we have to come up with a new angle thinking about regulation. Because we used to think it was the government who evaluates the situation, consulting the public and to regulate the business. But in this sharing economy, when we do not know who is whom, or maybe we know who is whom, we think we know who is whom, but the role of different actors that keep changing. How do we come up with a new thinking to deal with this issue? That's the first point. And the second point is what Lily talked about. It's really about the speed. So it used to be every change to receive would take a long time. So we have this whole chapter of how niche develop into something, and then we either maintain it or we wait for another breakthrough. But now with digital technology, with a big data, we can get access to the updated situation very fast. And the companies are reacting very fast, like Airbnb doing experiments on the platform, or Uber doing that, Mobike doing that all the time. They change their rating system, scoring system all the time, every second. And somebody's calling this algorithmic management.
Algorithmic.
Yes, it's a completely new way of manage. So how do we deal with these two new challenges in the regulatory framework and the biggest issues?
Vanessa?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And what's been interesting is, so one role government can play is that often businesses, in addition to having a focus on just the host and what they're seeing, they're also focused on their particular place in the market, whereas a city government, for example, is supposed to keep an eye on the entire whole of the city. And so the sharing economy has become an interesting bridge builder within city governments, because suddenly people in the transportation sector and the housing group and the food group are realizing that they're facing the same speed of technology and changes, and there's some similarities across those regulatory needs in terms of protecting consumers or encouraging other bylaws to allow innovation, etc. And so there's definitely we've experienced that in addition to sustainability, sharing has become a place where a lot of different government officials end up having to speak to each other. Because I think the biggest challenge that governments have is that they've organized in different departments, and even now feel like they're still having a hard time bridging across those different silos. So I think that's a real opportunity from the sharing space to really find those bridges. And then I just want to say something about the community sharing space, because often the regulatory conversation is about the big players that are but there's actually a lot of policies and regulations that were set up for consumer protection reasons that actually have a negative effect on things like community kitchens or sharing of meals. So what I'm finding is that there's a lot of revisiting of historical protections to check to see if there's another way. For example, if a government wants to share its equipment secondhand to somebody else, there's all sorts of liability issues around that and risk issues. So that's just a liability situation, but definitely with community kitchens, food safety, all sorts of other things start coming up to the front. And when people solve that, and I never told you, Vancouver has now got 3 neighborhoods that are piloting the Thingery, and they actually reworked the parking regulations and the neighborhood regulations in order to allow that to happen. So yeah, I think there's something really interesting at the community sharing space in terms of the government regulations and policies that can enable that or disable it.
Thank you very much. Is it long?
Yeah, I think we will have a good question. This question I also can study for a while, and Professor Rong and me, we have written a paper about this question. I think maybe we should to make a difference between sharing 1.0 and 1.0 and sharing 2.0. In sharing 1.0, I think the public regulation should be less because we have a platform to act as private monitoring. I think in sharing economy 1.0, this is peer-to-peer economy, and it's organized by a platform. So a platform firm should to monitor the two parties of trade, seller and buyer. If a seller have a cheat behavior, the platform use big data to find their bad behavior very easily, so can give him a monitor. So we call it a private monitor. Private means a platform. But in this platform economy or in the peer-to-peer economy, there maybe have some negative externality for some people. In some platform, some people may sell some legally stuff illegally. Illegally is that to make danger to society. So government should to regulation. So I think private monitor and the government, the public regulation by government in the sharing economy 1.0. But in sharing 2.0, like mobile, like Otto, I think government should have more regulation, especially there in the for example, they can reduce the taxation of the tax laws. So government maybe give some subsidies, some support. When they give them support, stops placing, make clothing, like give him some limitation. So I think in the same time, government regulation may be important in the sharing one.
Thank you.
I think
Yeah, so do you want to?
Yeah, because we wrote that paper is about we call it co-regulating between private and public.
Yeah.
So public means government, private means the platform.
Yeah.
So in sharing economy 1.0, we think that's co-regulating will be better. And we have a model, economics model, and say if the platform very big, like Alibaba, so it is better to co-regulate it. The performance will be better. If we only private platform to regulate this platform-based market, so the platform will hesitate to monitor all the goods. So they have some gray area. So it's better to co-regulate it. But in the sharing economy 2.0, it's more bon sharing and the more platform actually act as key roles. The platform company actually key roles. So in that way, the government and also the customer need to be pay more attention to regulating this business. And the customers themselves also need to be self-disciplined and self-organized. So their behavior should also be regulated. I think in the future, but right now we always discuss about regulating the government and regulating by the platform. We didn't talking about how to regulate the customer behavior in sharing economy.
Yeah.
So in the future, we need to talk about if you want to get benefit from sharing economy, you as a customer also need to be behave properly. How to behave properly? We need to, like you said, mobile hunters. It's the bottom-up organization. If we need a top-down things to monitor customers.
Thank you very much. No, very briefly, because I would like to get then a chance to the audience to. I know there are some questions the audience didn't have a chance to ask. So maybe I would also need to know very broadly to the audience. I mean, I have some more ideas, but yeah, please, Dr.
Just in political terms, perhaps we should discuss obviously like the sharing economy, but we're talking about regulatory processes. Do we need to think more about the established operators, the incumbent interests and businesses? I mean, we've got, I'd say, these niches of the sharing economy. If we're going to regulate them, we've got to accept that established businesses and interests, obviously we see particularly in the case of Uber and Lyft and companies like that, but it creates huge disruptions politically with established operators, incumbent businesses. And how could we assimilate this sharing economy into a wider economy which doesn't necessarily be very happy about accepting regulation? They can go to governments and say, so all this sharing economy, it's just killing our business. What's going to happen? What are you going to do about it? That's if you're sitting in a policymaker's chair, that's the basic problem you can be confronted with.
Wants to?
You mean how we can do inclusive innovation to respect the existing business?
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you do with all the people who get basically out of business, or are the win-win, but they are actually the losers of the new, of the new win-win? So, yeah. So who wants to?
What we were saying before, do something.
So.
You know, you
Sorry, do you
talking about this at the break,
This is kind of in some ways like a critical response to that, because I do think there's a lot that there's a lot of sort of positive ways in which government can and should ensure that platforms and new businesses integrate into the existing institutions that we have. But my sort of critical point is that one of the, talking about New York specifically, and Uber's and Lyft's entry into New York, which has attracted a lot of criticism, based in large part on its effects on drivers' livelihoods and living conditions. But this completely ignores the fact that there's lots of books being written about the poor living conditions of the New York taxi cabs for many decades, because it has been a market that is, to some extent, the regulator has been captured by the incumbents, and it is not really serving necessarily the interests of the drivers nor of the consumers very well. So I think there's a danger if we over-rely on government and think that government can never go wrong, and that the incumbents are all particularly always right. So this is a critical perspective, but I do think there's a lot the government should also do.
And one thing we found in Vancouver with the dynamics of regulation is it's not even just the incumbent industries that become upset, but also sharing car, like for example, the original car sharing was a cooperative called Moto, and when new car sharing platforms came into the city, that existing cooperative basically was critiquing the city's approach to the new car sharing. So the whole evolution of regulation, I think it's those different waves, and they actually did a really good job of managing that by maintaining Moto to have a percentage of that car sharing community with special incentives, while also keeping a new space for the newly arriving car sharing. And also encouraging the taxi industry to develop an app itself to become more competitive. So they kind of were navigating that market by supporting all the different players. But I think there's going to definitely be winners and losers, as there always is in economy. So part of the challenge is sometimes these things are also just inevitable, that there's going to be people who are deeply disappointed that their part of the economy is not working. So but I think that's more of an age-old problem. But I have seen cities navigate it, thinking about the dynamics of regulation a little bit more, as opposed to, this is the last thing we're doing on car sharing, keeping it kind of open, allowing themselves some flexibility there.
Yes, please.
The full response to this gentleman's questions. We think we better reframe this question as about if it's necessary to replace the very low efficient industry with the high efficiency, the new industry. Because for example, taxi industry, as we all know, it's very low efficiency, and we have Uber. Of course, we need to regulate Uber and taxi Uber and a lot of normal things we need to do. Then, of course, the P2P and also the internet-based calling service is much efficient than or pick up a car on the street. It's more efficient. So in that sense, we think the incumbent we need to respect, but we need to more respect about efficiency and industry productivity. So that's why we think the only thing we have to do is to regulate it in a proper way. We need to respect the new technology and the new efficiency. We can give an example about very, very key company called, in China, in Beijing, we have a taxi company called Shouqi company. This company is a very traditional taxi company, but right now it's very good to embrace internet. So it's become similar to Uber model. So it's a traditional business model plus internet, and then make it more efficiency. So right now it's similar to Didi in China, and it's hit the high-end market. So it's still survive a very good business model. So I think the incumbent it's existing business model. We need to test incumbent business. It's still workable for the current life.
So T company, the driver is there in front, not similar to Uber.
No, not a private driver. It's employed by this company.
Okay.
So it's just to put the offline taxi company online.
Cars also is only trade.
Oh, okay. The car, the vehicle is also owned by the company.
It's just a taxi company. Trading can just use internet technology to offer taxi service
to improve efficiency.
Yeah, very.
So other questions? Yeah, please.
Thank you for your community talks. You. I'm wondering who is the key agent of change? Other people, government, or company? I think from other people, maybe that there is duty is very important. Not just from decided by self-interest. Maybe for company, the action of the company that decided by self-interest. Not the condition of duty. For government, the only thing the government can do is supply good infrastructure for change. Yeah, but I see maybe for other people, the attitude of other people is very important. Who is the key agent?
You want to follow up on that? So that let's take if it's a related question, so that we can react to both.
It's on the ordinary, because honestly, I think I was thinking if you have data evidence of how much this practice come out this platform, so like people just start moving with the platform, and then they initiate some more direct sharing practices, and more in general to reach this time that sharing practices are not for profit can be need to be regulated and can be like a response to the challenges of platform capitalism most important. So if that's something that needs to be looked at, or the impact of the more like for-profit like economies.
You think that non-profits
have more community to reach the standards of practice. You're looking at if you have data on them.
So were you saying that non-profits sometimes are more connected to ordinary people, or what was your point about them?
That was it.
Okay.
You want to start, please?
I want to respond to all three of these questions. So first of all, the government is very confused. It's very confused itself, and it tried to do it very cautiously. So in the beginning, I think for the Western governments, it took them almost a decade to respond. Not that, maybe six years to respond to this Uber and Airbnb issue. And in China, it took the government 4 years to really respond back to this disruptive emergence of ride sharing. But in the case of bike sharing, in the third wave, the government responded immediately. So it was mobile places first bike in April last year, and in June already one of the district governments in Shanghai started to respond to that, to encourage such a new mobility model, because our interviews with policymakers are the same, because in the beginning they didn't know what Uber was, what Didi was. They didn't know whether they would align with our existing goals of green growth, of employment. They were themselves competing goals. So it had to assess and see who can best align with the government interest. Well, in the case of Mobike, because it came up with a green transport solution, the government immediately responded to that to encourage it. But what happened is, once the government tried to encourage another 100 companies want to do the same thing, and they flooded the streets, which is a huge externalities for the environment. When the government again wants to regulate that, what happened is that it's very interesting. The government didn't have any experience of regulating such kind of new thing, so they adopted a model of regulating rental transport services to the new regulation for bike sharing. But in this rental service, transport services, there was a very important regulation was that certain vehicles for rental purposes, public rental purposes, has to be replaced or dismissed after certain usage years. For example, a taxi has to be completely changed after 6 years. So they made the regulation that all the public van had to be displaced and new ones have to be used after 2 or 3 years. And that is in contrasting to the circular economy ideas, because the circular economy, we want to make it very durable so that it reduces the carbon emission, energy consumption of the production process. That was what Mobike was doing. It invested a lot of money to make the bike really strong, while other competitors they just produce cheap bikes. So that regulation was about to help regulate the markets, but in fact it encouraged cheaper products which are of low quality. So the government really need to try to integrate different arenas of its regulatory territories, integrate sustainability regulatory territory, which has a principle of circular economy, sustainability, with competition laws, labor laws, all of them coming together. But right now, it is a huge challenge.
So who is the key agent?
Who is a key agent? The problem with sharing economy that I observe is a key agent is floating and emerging and learning the boundaries. So I don't have a real answer for that.
Yeah, Brendan? Let's have Brendan.
I guess when you start to think about key agents, if you go back to some of those different ways of thinking about things, so if you think about the socio-technical kind of transitions literature, it would say there's multiple key agents, and I think that's the thing. So you can introduce something like Uber, but if nobody uses it, it's not going to be a success. And then, of course, it has to somehow fit in within those existing regulations, or it can be just kind of eliminated in some cities, and we've kind of seen that happen as well. So I think on the one hand, we have kind of the businesses, also the users, I think, are really important here. And I think at the moment we're kind of in a time where we're seeing a shift, at least I would say within certain socio-demographic groups, that has made this possible, and I think that's kind of a key that we kind of need to recognise. And then I think another thing when you think about agents, you have to start to think about the technologies, I would say an essential agent that have made it possible as well. So that's kind of,
yeah. Okay, Professor Wang?
Yeah, and I think in sharing economy 1.0, the platform form is a key agent because it can organize all the trade, and it low trade cost. And in the sharing 2.0, I think the company like Mobike, like Otto, it is a key agent, and it offers assessing service to everyone.
But in that way, the key agents are all those companies. Platform is also a company, Uber, like the firm involved sharing is also the firm like mobile. So that means the focal firm of the sharing economy ecosystem is always the company itself. So I think because they generated the business, they connected supply demand. Of course, they will be the key agent. But the only thing is how to monitor, regulate the key agent behavior properly, not to explore too much value from the customer, from value to the drivers, suppliers. Because as the team mentioned about platform capitalism, that's also our concern about if the platform, the firm become stronger, bigger and bigger, they can easily change the searching price very easily. So the key agents definitely the company themselves. The only thing how we need to shape them to make it proper.
Dini and then Vanessa.
So on the point about sort of non-profit motives versus non-profit motives and the role of users and so on, obviously for Airbnb, which is a for-profit accommodation sharing site, you have something like Couchsurfing, which is a site that has existed much longer, which is more peer-to-peer and is based on it's not on profit motive, but on different motives. And in the same way in history you have, and in present times as well, you have more embedded economies that are based on more reciprocal relationships and then altruistic behavior, and then you have market economies. But historically, as well as in internet times, these more embedded economies just haven't scaled as much and haven't been as efficient as a result, because, and I mean efficiency in a very specific economic sense here, because they rely on social networks and people knowing each other and trusting each other and caring about each other, and it turns out that doesn't really scale in the same way as anonymous market transactions guaranteed by a third-party regulator do. So I think both certainly exist, both types exist, and Couchsurfing has existed way longer than Airbnb. Yeah. But really Airbnb is just much bigger.
Yeah, and I think
so Vanessa and then we.
Yeah, so picking up on this point, I think it's really, when we think about platform economies, the ones that you're mentioning, then the business is at the center and the platform that they create. When we think about peer-to-peer, then it's these social networks and the time. I would put definitely much more on the, you could call them the ordinary consumer, but they're also in a way the community. So in a way it's very different. So one, when you're in a platform economy, it might be very transactional. You just want access to a bike. You don't care who owns it. Is it there? Does it work? That's all you want. If you're making a community garden together or sharing toys with neighbors or finding a way to put together a seed bank within a community of farmers, then the sharing is very different. It's connected by social trust. It's been, so then the agency is almost the individuals in the community, and it really gets back to the purpose of what's being shared and for what, and it gets back into what are the values that we're trying to promote with it. Because in one sense, sharing could be about efficiency and access to goods, but another thing, the idea of sharing is about reconnecting with each other and looking at building a more connected community. And if that's the goal, then we don't need to think about scaling in the same way. So in the social innovation work that I do, there's 3 types of scaling. There's scaling out, where you take one bike, more bikes, more bikes, more bikes, more bikes. Scaling out, that's replication. You can also scale out in terms of you can have bikes and then you add boats, right? Functional scaling out. Or you could scale out where you take the idea of bike sharing, how they do it, and apply it to something different. Scaling up is where you change the laws, right? The rules of the system. But there's another type of scaling. That's scaling deep, and that's culture change and individual change. So when you're building a community garden, or in Detroit, they have these swaps, community swaps, where people swap things with each other. It's not really about the stuff anymore. It's about the fact they're getting to know each other, they have a sense of belonging, they're not wasting things, they get to know each other, so they're more resilient if emergencies happen. It's a very different thing that's happening. So that's one point I want to make, and about agency. So the platforms, I think it's the businesses, but in community and connectivity, it's much more communally held. And the government has a role to play in platforms, making sure that those accesses are equitable and safe. But they also have a role to play in making sure we enable community-based work. And the final thing I'll say about nonprofits is that all of this access over ownership has brought up big questions about ownership. Who owns these things? And so it's been really interesting because all of a sudden people are looking at cooperatives again, and they're saying, I don't need a company somewhere out there to own the cars that I have. I could be both a consumer and a producer. I could be an owner and a user. So cooperative and ownership models are one of the things that the sharing economy has raised up again. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how that evolves into the future. It might not just be traditional market-based, but these other things.
One comment. I would say, we should stop a kind of antagonizing market-based and community-based, because you have a lot of very hybrid, very different time scale, very different social scales and spatial scales getting together. So indeed you have a kind of mushrooming that all these kind of, and you have these ecosystems which are basically, harder to understand, but also characterized by higher resilience and very multiple dimensions. So Tom, and this is going to be a kind of the last question, and I'm also the timekeeper, and the lunch is getting here, and I know people have commitments afterwards. So please, let's see if there are. If there are more questions, I'm going to get Tom first, and whoever else wants to. Yes, exactly, and and then I'm going to let you, get a chance to all of the panelists to react. Yeah, so Tom.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to go back to the issue of sustainability, and I think what you're regulating in terms of behavior matters. So, can we really begin with mobility without talking about human nature? So, in other words, is our desire to be mobile essentially unquenchable? And if it is, and if the transaction costs are lowered and the efficiencies are increased, is that really going to reduce people's mobility? No, they will just consume more mobilities. And if that's the case, can we live without the communal sanctions, which are a big part of the sharing economy in communities? And it seems to me you can't. And the more you're efficient, the more you'll have the rebound effect of people just sticking with mobility, taking more rides, which even if they're low carbon rides, there are other externalities that are created. So the one solution proposed to that is to actually limit people's transactions, or to progressively tax their transactions in terms of how many times you can use the system in a given period. Is that the only way to achieve sustainability in this kind of platform model? Or are there other ways that you could get the consumer to behave more sustainably? Because I don't see it happening with platforms that just become more efficient, at least not with things that people have unquenchable appetites for, and particularly in cities.
No, so sorry, will you get more questions? So yeah, please.
So actually, my question is quite simple. You've got different definitions like share economy 1.0, 2.0, or you generally feel that the sense of the state that is moving to the share economy 2.0, or this could be more prevalent than before. So my question would be, what do you see as the obstacles or the difficulty to move or to promote? Or is it really good to, as you see in some pictures, that a huge amount of those bikes are being piled up? Would that be actually as a more efficient way? Yeah, so that's
Okay, so who wants to?
Yeah, I want to respond Tom and Jalan. Yes, in the short run, we acknowledge that, we admit that there will be more bikes on the street. So the company produces more cars to serve the the on-demand access service. But in the long run, people will reduce the possibility to buy a new car, buy a new bike. In that sense, it will reduce the future production of those products. So in that way, we now we still predict, not calculate, predict. In the long run, we think the production of some products will be reduced. Why we need to own a car right now? Because we reduce uncertainty. But in the future, if you can hit the button and get a car easily, why we need to? So in long run, the total amount of car will be decreased, especially in the lower level or middle level cars. So I think it will be towards sustainability.
Just to give some evidence, there isn't such a calculation being carried out on car sharing, but there was such a study carried out on closed renting system. So people did a life cycle analysis of carbon emissions for the traditional closed buying scheme, and when people moved to closed rental system, indeed, when people moved to closed rental system, a swapping system, they get more items per year, but overall, calculating the production, supply, everything, overall, this small rebounds in demand did not can offset the whole reduction. It is smaller than the total reduction of the shift from the owning to the rental system.
Vanessa?
Yeah, so one of the things that's important with the assessment of the footprint, which is why we put absolute reductions, is that we're seeing rebound effects across systems. So people get a cheaper Airbnb rate and then buy more tourist goods because they've saved money on accommodation, or take more flights because they can save money on the cost of their things. So what you're getting at is absolutely accurate. And similarly, many of these companies are built on a glut of consumer goods. So secondhand markets are currently have a lot of resources to draw on. But if we're producing less in the future, then those will be reduced as well. So we have to actually plan for a shift in the availability of goods. So it's not inevitably going to happen that by replacing or providing rental or providing the access, that it will lead to an absolute change in the way people live their lives. So I think our task is to keep our eyes on the change of the economy. So what Hugo was doing on looking at the circular economy implications, I think is the way to go, and the equity considerations, because it's very easy to only design one part and have it rebound. So my answer to you is limits are one way to do that, but the other way is to actually be profiling new market and business model systems and new cultural systems that are shifting that conversation around how much is enough, durable products versus obsolete products. So for example, all of the product service systems type business models where people lease carpet instead of buying or lease, those are great examples of new business models that still provide profit, but they're based on a leasing system as opposed to moving things into landfill. And then I think on the cultural side, an interesting example from Vancouver again is that Moto, the car sharing company, actually has a set. Their users form community groups that help each other live sustainable lives. So the company connects people with others wanting to make more sustainable choices. So it becomes an entry point into a cultural conversation. And I think there's something really interesting around being very obvious about this is a cooperative, being very obvious about the values behind Moto. So that's another thing. So I think profiling these business models, because everyone, I'm not sure if you get this all the time, if everyone shares everything, the economy is going to crash, right? People say this to me all the time. And what I say is, no, it's a very different type of economy that's based on quality, not quantity, based on dynamics, not on moving things into landfill. That's what we want to move towards.
What I'm saying is actually if we don't rationalize, ultimately the environment is hurt something.
Yeah, and I'm saying that I think you're right, that the one part of that limits is that piece, but I think if we don't think about the aspiring part of it, we end up only having the conversation about capping. But I think there's also within that cap a lot of dynamicism, So I always talk about this is the amount we have globally, and also here are the things this is how we gain what we gain. We gain health if we eat less red meat. We gain. So I think combining capping with the possibility space of the new economy, I think is big.
Brandon.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Please.
So I guess my first point would be that we haven't always had the sensational need to be mobile. That's a very cultural, specific thing that's emerged over time, and well, not just cities, but more generally with the emergence of the system of automobility, or system based around the car. And I think kind of related to that is the next point, thinking about these things, is norms and expectations will be on the move. And so we can't just assume that we introduce car sharing or these schemes. And at the moment, car sharing, like a lot of the figures suggest, people travel less, they use public transport, they cycle and walk more, and they reduce their carbon emissions, they're likely to sell cars. And while I think that's interesting and good, we can't assume that's just what's going to happen if everybody moves to car sharing schemes. And I think that's sort of what you're partly raising, but I think we also need to recognise the fact that these things are constantly on the move. And so there'll be no solution. It's not a solution, it's always going to be something emerging. So in the case of cars, sharing, if you think about autonomous vehicles, and if they come into the system, what does that kind of mean for lots of other things? And then related again, kind of going back to these issues of social justice, it's not everybody moving around. There's lots of people who can't necessarily afford to move, who can't access various places, and that's where some of these discussions I think need to come back.
Really? Oh, sorry.
Tom, could you answer your question? Because if we get more easier to get a car, so we will travel more. So.
I was simply raising the rebound effect, and I take the fact that it is a cultural problem, essentially, but we don't seem to be putting as much effort into that cultural problem.
That's right.
Although we recognize that communities do sanction people who are too greedy, and there are transaction costs to my borrowing your car for the 15th time, in the weekend. There are social costs to that, but those can be reduced very much in something like a platform, and someone can use it essentially for the middle class, like you said, just apply to everyone, but they can use it essentially to increase their mobility, but that has knock-on effects. So I don't know with increasing populations, if you can avoid the rational question, if you really want to be attentive to the environment. And we should be thinking about it as a constructive process of rational. But the radical proposals like personal carbon allowance were quickly dismissed. But the principle behind that rational method is still very needed as part of the conversation.
Really?
So I obviously don't have an answer to that question either, but I think the question for us when we talk about platforms and the sharing economy is whether this sort of sharing economy boom is a step in the transition towards the answer, right? People changing, culture changing, people's consumption behavior changing, or whether it's in fact just helping to entrench a cultural form based on individual mobility, and whether the effects in the end don't just amount to 10-20% savings that are possibly then compromised by rebound effects elsewhere, if in fact what we need is completely radical transformation. So I don't know which one it is. Is this a transition towards that, or is this in fact just helping to perpetuate the model that is ultimately not sustainable? And this is not clear to me.
Yeah, pick up your point is, when we talk about sharing economy, it's just a niche player compared with the traditional economy, or it will be become mainstream in the future. So that's why we talk about the brochure, why it will be. So in the future, the car market, the selling market, still sell a car, or it's just sell the access service. So that's what we want to dig out in the future. The sharing economy is the mainstream model or a niche player. That's
I give you
Chinese examples about reduce cost. In China, the difference with United States or UK is government bought many cars, and some company also bought many cars, and the office will use cars freely. But now, when BB and another internet sharing cars company appear, and now government reduce their cars, and some big company also reduce their cars to both the BB service. So in China there's smoke barrier. When there's a smoke barrier in Beijing, government order they stop use their cars. But now the government has now reduced dramatically. So maybe this is an example for you about. Yes.
Okay, you guys, you are the organizer of this. You are going to have the last word.
So I just feel like the point Tom was can be potentially conflictual. Why? Because sustainability itself, this concept, has everything. Right? It's not only about environmental sustainability, also about social justice, also about providing enough and decent jobs. So, for example, in Shanghai, where we study, Shanghai is a city that is executing this excellent capping, rationing system. That we cannot have population growth, cannot have car ownership growth. Then what happened is that the government, when it started to regulate the river, it just said only drivers with local residence and local cars can operate. So 90% of the drivers who came to the city to look for a job, because of the economic slowing down, a lot of people lost their job in the heavy industry or previous traditional industry. They saw driving, Uber driving, taxi driving as an opportunity. So within 2-3 years, millions of them rushed into cities to become a driver, to become transitional, in their transitional periods. And for this rational capping system, in the name of environmental sustainability, certain groups lost their jobs, but indeed the traffic jam was reduced. So it's really hard to think about it. So maybe we really need to, come up with a new thinking mode in designing what is good, or maybe sustainability, this concept itself, has so many internal conflicts, and how can governance, business, and the public to reinvent urban life within multiple complexities and conflicts.
Thank you. So I would like you to join me in thanking all the panelists and all the speakers of the